start from the line above that?
I shall.
Yeah.
So now we proceed from where we left off yesterday. As we see in figure 8, there are 3 worlds like ours, which we labeled A, B, and C. All 3 are inhabited by human beings in their gross forms, but realization can be achieved only in A. Yet none of these worlds lasts forever, as explained yesterday. When one cools down and gets set aside, its place is taken by another, and so on and on and on.
I'm going to take us back to look at that figure again, since now we're recording, so the people who see the recording can see what Baba is referring to. It's this figure, which came up earlier. So A is the ocean of God, and B is the creator point. And the 3 worlds he's talking about are in this range 7 here, the C range, if you can see it. That's A, B, and C. That would be the 3 worlds that are interconnected. A is this Earth, and B and C are 2 other planets closely connected with our Earth. He's going to say a lot more about this. And he gave the explanation back then, down on the lower left. Here you see in the 7th range, the Earth planet in the course of time cools off and moves aside and becomes A prime, which is a moon, and ceases to host human life. And then what had been B moves up to the A position, and what C had been C moves up to the B position. So you have a new Earth, and the moon is the old Earth having moved aside. That's the figure that he was alluding to and what Melissa just read. Okay.
I'm trying to figure out where to start. Start here at now? Yes.
Now,
Yeah.
now.
Now let us return to the story in its beginnings, when the great ocean of truth begins to move. This movement can be given the name universal energy. It does not take place outside of the Darya or ocean. It is from and within Darya. One cannot call it alag or separate from Darya. All this is to say that the movement is caused by no outside force, but arises from within Darya itself. And co-arising and concurrent with the movement come the emptiness, pokal, within the Darya, as the hollow, empty space between 2 waves created by the movement. This pokal is from and within the Darya. It follows that the 2, the movement and the emptiness, are 1, yet they remain 2. What I, Shri, will now prove is that energy and pokal are 1 in God, and that the universe emerges from this pokal. This comes to pass because the universal movement clashes with Akash, and this clash creates 2 states, one of energy and one Akash. I say this by way of introduction. From the energy state arises the subtle world, and from the Akash state precipitates the gross world. Energy forms itself into 7 divisions, whereas Akash gives rise to 1 state only.
So there's a lot of content there.
We have been speaking of Akash, but what exactly is it? Where does it come from? Let us answer this question in the form of a theoretical proof. Take Paramatma as equivalent to knowledge. Then we could say that knowledge equals everything, equals light, equals Bharpur, fullness. Take now the reverse of these. The opposite of Bharpur is emptiness, pokal. The opposite of knowledge is ignorance. The opposite of everything is nothing. The opposite of light is shadow. We can summarize all of this in an algebraic equation. Knowledge equals Paramatma, whose opposite term is ignorance. Knowledge equals everything, whose opposite term is nothing. Knowledge equals light, whose opposite term is shadow. Knowledge equals Bharpur, whose opposite term is emptiness. Earlier, we explained that in the original state, when the ocean is quiet, Paramatma is sleeping. That is, knowledge is ignorant, by which we mean to say that knowledge knows that it knows nothing.
This might actually be a good moment to read this. Yeah.
I shall. Infinite intelligence gives examples of similar usages in such phrases as, knowledge knows that it does not know. The editors explain this phrase thus. The phrase, knowledge knows that it does not know, does not mean that knowledge is aware of and acknowledges that it does not know, in the sense that an ordinary person would do when asked a question that he does not know the answer to. When he says that he does not know. May I read that sentence again? That was a little hard to parse. Knowledge is aware of and acknowledges that it does not know in the same sense that an ordinary person would do when asked a question that he does not know the answer to. He says that he does not know. The sense of the phrase implies rather that knowledge misconstrues the not knowing as knowing, and thus actually experiences the state of that it does not know. That is ignorance as knowledge. Fascinating.
Yeah, maybe this is something we could talk about. This is an important idea in infinite intelligence.
Do you want to speak of it now? Or shall I proceed?
We can come back to it.
Okay. Now, when does this knowledge, the knowledge of ignorance, come? It comes while waking up, which is to say, when the ocean begins its movement. So at this stage, knowledge knows that it is ignorant. Now just think this through. Knowledge is present, and knowing is present as the knowing that I am ignorant. This very I am ignorant is itself a kind of knowledge. So in this state of knowledge, we find all three: knowledge, knowing, and ignorance. A further conclusion can be drawn from the equation knowledge and Bharpur equal ignorance and pokal.
Bharpur again is fullness.
How so? Just as there is ignorance in knowledge, so too there is pokal or emptiness in Bharpur or fullness. Again, when we say that God is unconscious, we mean that knowledge is ignorant. It follows from this that ignorance is in knowledge, and by the same token, Bharpur contains pokal. This proves our point that it is from this pokal that all this world and its paraphernalia are created. So today we have understood this point. In God, energy and Akash always abide, even when God is unconscious and the ocean is quiet. But when the motion arises, being then made conscious, they manifest. And when this energy within God clashes with this Akash, which is also within God, they manifest in the form of lightning. The first creation is this clash, or rather, the cause of this clash, which lies in knowledge becoming ignorant. For a depiction of this clash, see figure 11 on the next page.
Sure, let's take a look at that right now. You've seen this one before. So you see, Baba has brought into this discussion the whole ideation of knowledge. So you have knowledge, knowing, and ignorance. So he's remember how at the beginning he brought up three systems, that is light globes, shadows, reflections, ocean, waves, drops, bubbles, and the third was knowledge, knowing, and ignorance. So now he's brought the knowledge terms into this. So this, I jumped. So here you have on the top, knowledge equals Paramatma, which would be equivalent to Darya or ocean. Now there's knowing or universal mind. We're going to get more on this. And then out of this comes pran and Akash. He didn't use the word pran in this lecture, but he talked about energy and movement. And those are the same thing. And Akash and pokal are effectively the same thing also. So here they clash, and you see on the bottom right, lightning or vij. That's the word used. And out of this comes the whole universe. So this is his creation, mythos, his creation narrative that he's been giving. He gave it last time, but he's recapitulated here.
So Ward, can we go back to that footnote on the second page? Yeah.
Let's finish the lecture, because I think we just
I
have
thought we
this
did.
one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Okay.
we just have this little
All right.
blip.
Okay.
Start with when, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
When knowledge knows that it knows, then it is Sadguru. After this talk had been concluded, there followed some further general explanation on the subjects of God, the soul, mind, the subtle and gross worlds, the creation and destruction of sanskaras, and related matters. And read the footnote.
Sure, yeah. And this refers to all these equal signs, like Bharpur equals ignorance and all of that.
The equal sign is meant to designate a matching off, in the sense that the terms on the two sides of the sign are counterparts. Plainly, it does not signify equivalence in the sense of identity, as in a mathematical equation. For further discussion, see the associated endnote 4 on page 567 to 568.
So we can skip that for now. Okay, so that's that lecture. So two huge topics that have come up, as I mentioned, knowledge has come into it. And notice when he was talking about light globes or light and light globes, or ocean and waves and drops, those metaphoric systems do not bring experience and consciousness into themselves. But now when he's bringing knowledge as another coordinated term, now consciousness is a part of his story. And another big thing is opposites. So we have these opposites, and it's almost like these are different attributes: Paramatma, ignorance; everything, nothing; light, shadow; Bharpur, emptiness. It's almost like the same one reality seen under different aspects. And for those of you remembering God Speaks, you may recall that when the first Jivatma identified with the first form, it experienced contrariety. Any of you remember that? Contrariety. Well, I think opposites is what you experience with contrariety. Paramatma experiences itself like knowing that knowledge knows ignorance. That's contrariety, because knowledge is knowledge, but when it experiences itself as ignorance, it's experiencing itself as the opposite of what it really is, which is contrariety. So I would link this opposites business with that portion of God Speaks. Okay, so those are just some comments. Where do you want to run with this?
So let's go back to the footnote at the bottom of that page. I think it's an important one, don't you?
Yeah, it is.
So I wonder if Sam, are you able to see that and read the footnote?
Yes.
Okay. And then from there, we'll go on to the rest of it and reread it, I think. How's that work? Okay.
Okay. Infinite intelligence gives examples of similar usages in such phrases as knowledge knows that it does not know. The editors explained this phrase thus: the phrase knowledge knows that it does not know does not mean that knowledge is aware of and acknowledges that it does not know, in the sense that an ordinary person would do when asked a question that he does not know the answer to. He says that he does not know. The sense of the phrase implies rather that knowledge misconstrues the not knowing as knowing, and thus actually experiences the state of that it does not know, i.e., ignorance, as knowledge. Infinite Intelligence, page 131.
I wonder if people follow that. So
Well,
when you say, yeah.
Let's
Go
take
ahead.
a few questions maybe, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Lindsay has her hand up.
Mm.
Give me a second, Lindsay. Go ahead and unmute.
Actually, I don't have a question about this. I have a question about something else, so I'll wait.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth has a question about it. Questions only, no long comments, please. Elizabeth, oh, sorry, I forgot. I better give you your power back.
I'm requesting that we read the whole thing again because I think it's too dense to understand on one reading. Thank you.
Well, that's why we're recording it, because we know it's too dense to get in one reading.
Yeah, I think as we discuss it, we can unpack it and review portions. I think that might do the trick. Also, look, we're talking an exposition by the Lord of Knowledge. So anyone who really wants to understand it, well, I think you've got 40 years job ahead of you.
If not lifetimes.
Lifetimes, yeah. Maybe by the next Advent we'll be there. Yeah, but we can unpack all this stuff.
Does anybody have any questions about that footnote or comments? I think Christina had her hand up. Yeah.
So when Baba says something like knowledge knows that it does not know, or knowledge knows that it knows nothing, despite the way the English sounds, and I'm saying this because the phrase comes up a lot in Infinite Intelligence, what it actually means is knowledge knows not knowing. That is, knowledge has the active experience of ignorance. and it takes ignorance to be knowledge. And if you want an example, look in the mirror. This is you, unless you're happen to be God realized, because we are experiencing ignorance as though it was reality, as though it was infinite knowledge. So that's knowledge knowing that it does not know. It is knowing ignorance as if it were knowledge.
Christina, go ahead.
Yes. In God Speaks, there is a term, a phrase that is repeated endlessly, and it is God in the man state.
Hmm.
And in group readings that we've done, we just take that, put hyphens in between all the words, and we use it as one term, God in the man state. It's one concept. And it helps a lot because then you don't have to keep re-unpacking each time. So that it does not know, to my mind,
Right.
I just put hyphens in there, and that's one
Right.
term. And it is that it does not know. And that's
Right.
one concept.
Right. I agree. I agree.
Good. Thank you.
We could say ignorance in a way, but
Yeah.
that it does not know is articulates it a little bit better.
I have my hand up, so when I read this footnote, what it brings up to me is this common notion anymore of you don't know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore you take what you know as the totality.
Yeah.
And you self-limit in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So he's reminding us to always allow for the fact that we don't know what we don't know.
Right. And even beyond that, what the little bit that we know is actually not knowing.
Yeah.
It's actually ignorance.
It's only the illusory part.
Because
there.
it doesn't exist. It's the illusion. Yeah.
I do have another comment, which is in the form of a question, actually. Ward, it seems to me that this is highly philosophical. And by that, I mean that it is, there are equal signs in it. It's very logical. It's very proof oriented. And he even says, Shri will now prove. And
wait till you get to the next lecture.
Oh, I'm sure. But the way that philosophical learning or proofs develop is you must get the first one in order to get the ones that build upon it. So if you don't get the first one, you're off in space. So I think it really is worthwhile to go over and really understand this proof before, when anyone buys the book and reads it, because we can't really do it
Right.
for everybody now. But, I was raised with knowledge being the enemy. Oh yeah, destroy the mind, it's all about the heart. And I'm so thrilled to be reading this. I'm truly thrilled to be reading this.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Christine.
obviously this kind of knowledge was not the enemy of the heart in view of the way the boys reacted to this.
Correct.
I mean, when you look at a passage like this, just a subjective comment, obviously Baba was doing mind-heart work, because look at how conceptual and logical and rational this is. And look at how these boys reacted. So obviously there was a mind-heart work going on.
It's truth.
Yeah, it's truth. Yeah, which is, here's, let me, if you don't mind, I'm going to flip in a bit of construction of this. You wouldn't see it just yet, but by the next lecture, I think it might be helpful. And that is, we're getting dichotomies, right? Like everything and nothing. But actually, what we're going to get is triads. That would be in this way. All right, I'll use knowledge, knowing, and ignorance. those three. We've already had a little bit of it. Well, you see, knowledge and ignorance. Okay, also, let me use these terms: a primordial opposite and a secondary opposite. The primordial opposite would be like the everything and the nothing, because the everything is the reality of God, and the nothing is the, what's the nothing? The every, how do you even define it?
Imagination.
Yeah, it manifests as the imagination. It doesn't even exist at all, right? A secondary opposite would be like knowing and all right, I'll say pran and Akash. We've gotten the real ones. Both of them belong to the domain of the imagination. We talked about this last time, right? But within the domain of the imagination, pran is a likeness of the everything, and Akash is a likeness of the nothing, even though both of them are in the domain of the nothing. You get it? It's almost like that primordial duality mirroring itself to within the imaginary domain, creating these secondary opposites. I don't know if you follow that idea. So
Can
thus
you
it is.
repeat the last part again? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, the primordial. Okay, let me say this also about the primordial opposites, the everything and the nothing. They're actually not opposites, because the nothing doesn't exist, whereas the everything does. So even though I'm calling them primordial opposites, they really aren't opposites. One has reality and the other doesn't. Nonetheless, when that mirrors itself or shadows itself or casts its image or projects fractals of itself within the illusory domain, you get these secondary opposites where one of them mirrors or reflects the likeness of the reality, and the other reflects the likeness of the nothing. You have a mirror of the mirrored shadow of the everything and a mirror shadow of the nothing. Thus, fullness and emptiness would be an example of that, and that's pran and Akash. Pran is fullness and Akash is emptiness. But actually, both of those are within the domain of the nothing. Do you get the idea? In other words, the secondary opposites. And in this way, the everything and the nothing, these primordial opposites, have a mirror likeness within the imaginary domain that allows us to experience the diversity of things, that allows us to experience contrariety, good and bad, light and darkness, fullness and emptiness, and so forth. All our experiences of these things are within the domain of the nothing, but they have a likeness to the real, true, primordial duality. This is my understanding. Baba doesn't articulate this distinction, but I think by the time we get to the next lecture, you'll see just what I mean. So thus we wind up getting triads. And an example would be knowledge, which is the reality with a capital A. It's Paramatma. And then you get knowing, which is the illusory mirror likeness of knowledge, and you get ignorance. So knowledge, knowing, and ignorance. Knowledge is the reality. Knowing and ignorance both belong to the domain of the illusory. So but in the next lecture, we're going to have a whole series of triads where maybe this will be more clear. Now you may disagree with me. Baba doesn't articulate this distinction between primordial opposites and secondary opposites, but I think it's clearly implied.
And
So
I
that's a
agree
thought.
that this does come clear on the second part, the second talk for today.
Yeah, it's right there. We're going to get triads. Yeah.
Okay, we have more questions. Do you need to ask your question now, or do we want to read a little bit more of the repeat? Lindsay, you're first.
You're muted.
Put her on mute, dear.
I know, but the little hand on the screen, I thought was my arrow.
Tell me about it.
It's not.
Mhm.
Okay, hi. My question is pran, or excuse me. All right. Akash, what's the relationship between pokal and Akash? Okay. and-
They're different terms for the same thing.
Well, really? I mean, are we going to discover that? Because so far I'm not getting that. What I'm getting is pokal is a particular kind of emptiness. It's the bottom of the trough. As different from Akash, which is, you've talked before about how it's
Hmm.
space. It's, you know, much larger than emptiness, sort of. It's something that has nothing in it. So I'm just asking.
Well, okay, so you guys can assess this for yourself, and you don't necessarily have to agree with me. But it seems over the course of the book that he's using them essentially as synonyms. The two words do connote a different aspect of it, though, because pokal does have the connotation of hollowness, and Akash doesn't connote that the same way. But so he uses, yeah.
Okay, well,
But-
I'm asking in part because I missed Friday, but the sessions before and then this one keep putting me into a place where I'm seeing waves and the interface of waves and sort of the science of waves. And I'm curious about that as being a part of the metaphor. And
yeah, I agree.
and-
I think we saw it clearly in the previous page. Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
Thank
right
you.
here.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you know, this is right in the middle here. I don't know if you can see my
I
little.
see it. Yeah.
Okay,
Holly,
and the co-arising and co-arising and concurrent with the movement, that's pran, right? And the emptiness, pokal, within Darya, that's the ocean,
Mhm.
as the hollow, empty space between two waves created by the movement. So you're seeing the waveform.
Mhm.
Pokal creates the trough, and he doesn't use the word, but the pran, or the energy, creates the crest. I don't know, people who are not into physics might not care about this so much, but the waveform is of primordial importance. You know, light is in the form of waves, sound is in the form of waves. When we talk about the word of God, the primordial vibration, well, that implies a waveform, right? That's the form that sound takes. So he's describing the origination of the waveform as the alternation of pran and Akash. Do you see that?
Mhm.
This is actually a huge idea, an absolutely huge idea.
Mhm. So,
Thank
you know,
you.
just a reminder, we're trying to get into this without going too deep, because we just don't have the time for it. We wanted to get through these, but if we don't, it's not the end of the world. So do you want to take more questions at this point, Ward? There are a lot of hands up.
Okay, maybe from people who haven't spoken yet.
Yeah.
Are there any?
So Jean Wilson. Go for it.
Okay,
Oh, I'm sorry, Mahou. I'll get
I'll
you.
ask my question now. I was thinking, Ward, how in the past you've often spoken about macrocosm, microcosm. Does this
You're breaking up.
Yeah, we're gonna lose you.
We're getting little blips of pran and a lot of Akash here in this waveform.
Musical keynote.
Music.
I know, it's funny. I'm sorry, Jim, we're losing you, dear. He's having a lot
Jeremy
of
took
trouble.
over. You're making a musical composition.
He's having a lot of trouble with his connection. Let's
Yeah.
go on to Mahu, and we'll hopefully get. I can't even use.
Can I be the next one? I'm trying to formulate my question so I take less time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to, yeah. Maybe after yeah, you call somebody and the next one, if you don't mind.
All right, Ellen, Van Ellen.
Yeah.
Jim's still trying to talk. Oh, you guys are so cute. Go ahead, Ellen, you need to unmute him.
My original reaction was that you were talking about triads, and what you said before that was absolutely wonderful. But when you got to triads, it seems to me that it's not a triad because they're on different levels. One is
You're right.
all developing and the other two are on an entirely different level. And
Right.
a triad implies some kind of equality. And
Right.
then I had a second observation, which is I think that the words inherently can't express what are being described by pran and pokal and Akash and pokal. And therefore, these are different ways of looking at it. And the pokal, using the use of pokal implies that it's within the ocean, which the Akash doesn't. And I think that's why where the two words are being used. Neither one can express it because words can't. That make sense at all?
Yeah, I think so. They're very useful because their connotations are a little bit different, but they're referring to the same basic elements in this duality of pran and Akash in different ways with different connotations.
But you're right, but they're useful because they give you two different viewpoints. I mean, this is looking at it, and this is looking at it from over here.
They're connotatively expressive, you could put it that way. Yeah.
Mahu, are you ready or should I go on?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, I have two questions, but I'd like to ask just one now that, I actually thought about it a couple of days ago. I mean, as of Friday, but here Baba is helping us. And that's about exactly this page that you have it on. Yeah, don't go down, please. Yeah. So it's about the movement word. Now I don't want to throw myself off that by calling it the universal energy, but the dynamic of it. I like to just go there. Yeah, I mean, I go by reading it and my interpretation. So it says it does not take place outside of the Darya or ocean. It is from the within Darya. Okay. One cannot call it a log or separate from Darya. All this is to say, I mean, the question is so from here. All this is to say that the movement is caused by no outside force, but arises from within Darya itself, and co-arising and concurrent with the movement came the emptiness pokal within Darya as the hollow empty space between two waves created by movement. This part, I'm very visual. It throws me off. I'm trying to understand this. Within the Darya, when the movement creates the emptiness, the location of the emptiness, it says, as the hollow empty space between two waves created by the movement. Now, these two waves, I thought it's the beginning of pran and Akash, or pran or pokal. Is that correct, Ward?
Yeah.
Okay. So what is this hollow empty space between the two waves? What is it?
Well,
should I even ask this question? Yeah.
It's the pokal.
It's the pokal.
So when the movement begins, actually the movement begins and it breaks into 7 parts. We were doing that there. So you're getting.
Oh, thank you. You're right. I forgot about that.
So when with the this is like when pran starts to happen, you necessarily have a co-arising of Akash or pokal because they come
Concurrently,
together.
right?
Yeah. And when you get the two of them, the pran part is like the wave. And when he says wave, I'm thinking the crest of the wave, and the pokal is the trough between two waves, and thus you get the wave form.
Great. Now I got it visually. Thank
And
you.
again, okay, so out of the knowing or universal, you have the pran and Akash co-arising. I think pran here would be like that universal energy arising.
Which gives life to opposites, or which one gives life to opposites? I mean, that's the next concept.
Well, I mean, actually movement would be like, it's one of the opposites, to tell the truth.
Yes, you're right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So opposites have already arisen.
Already.
So Baba's
Oh,
very emphatic that this is within Darya. You see, Baba is not willing to allow that there can be anything separate from or outside of God. God alone is real, and God encompasses the real and the nothing too. That's really an insistent point of his. He's not going to allow for a new metaphysics where you've got God and a creation that are separate from each other.
Yes, very, very good. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Right.
I
Thank you,
didn't
Mom.
think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And just one quick comment. I agree
I'm
with
sorry,
you.
Mahu.
Oh,
I'm sorry, Mahu.
I'm sorry.
You know how it is. You're used to me by now. We have a bunch of people yet. Cheryl.
Yeah, it just seems to me you're giving great emphasis to triad here, Ward. I really liked Ellen's comment, but it's a separate comment that I'm making. I don't quite understand. There seems inherently an importance to triad for you. Could you talk about that a moment?
You know, in the next lecture, we're going to get a whole bunch of triads. So I think it will help to clarify that. But anyway, the example I gave was knowledge, knowing, and ignorance. So knowledge is, okay, we saw when these opposites were listed, right? Knowledge is a God term, right? Here we have it. But knowing is within the illusory world, the false likeness of knowledge, and ignorance is its opposite. So thus we get a triad in that way. As Ellen pointed out, though, actually knowing and ignorance are both within the domain of the illusory. So it's not really a triad. I don't know what term would be better than that. But we're going to get a lot more of these triads coming right up in the next lecture. It's the basic structure of it in parts.
But what do you think is the importance of that? That's my question.
Let's bring that up in the next lecture, because
Okay.
then we'll have a lot more data.
Okay, so you know, I know a lot of you really, really want to get into this. I feel badly for all of you, and everybody has a pertinent question, but we want to try to give everybody a chance to ask their questions. Okay, so Melissa, please go ahead.
Yes, I want to thank you, Ward, for bringing so clearly that idea of the wave, because I feel as though I understood something from that I've never understood before, which is that a wave inherently has a crest and a trough. And so by calling this event a wave, we're immediately invoking the fact that it has two opposite aspects, the pran and the Akash, the crest and the trough. And that was a real revelation to me. So I thank you very much for that.
Well, it was a real revelation to me too when I read this originally. I think that is a huge idea. As people start to move more and more into science and logic and philosophy, that's really going to be a big one. Once again, the word of God, or Hinduism has the Brahmanad, Brahma is God, and Nad is word. The word, that's their term for the word that produces the whole universe. Well, what is a word? A word is a sound. And sound is a wave with crests and troughs. So Baba is explaining the origination of that in terms of pran and Akash. Huge idea, huge idea. And again,
And I
like
had-
you, Melissa, that thought never crossed. Who would ever have thought of such a thing? But it was total revelation to me when I first read it.
Completely
Mm.
beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
It is beautiful.
Elizabeth.
Phew! I have two minor comments and a question for Ward regarding that phrase right after the one that Mahu referred to. First comment is, I don't think this is so much philosophy as logical proofs. And the other comment, triads do not necessarily mean equivalency. They're a grouping of three things. I would only assume equivalency if equal marks were put between them. But the question I have is that part that begins with the paragraph, now let us return to the story of its beginning, when the great ocean of truth begins to move, and then you go down to,
Let's see, where is that?
yeah, then you go down.
Was that on the previous page? I should know this.
It was
by
where
this
Mahu
list.
was.
Yeah, previous page word.
Yeah,
Yeah, here we are. Here we are.
Okay, so the part I'm interested in is this concept of latency, and both pran and Akash being part of the ocean. I'm wondering if that is related to the concept of latency, and it's so okay. This pokal is from and within the Darya. It follows that the two, the movement and the emptiness, are one, yet they remain two. What I, Shri, will now prove is that energy and pokal are one in God, and that the universe emerges from this pokal. This comes to pass because the universal movement clashes with Akash, and this clash creates two states, blah, blah, blah. So my question is that, are they considered part of the latency within the unity of God?
Yeah, no, I would say definitely yes. This is that original unity is, if we wanted to extend our study, we could look at the 10 states of God, the first state of God, the original beyond state of God, where everything is latent and nothing is expressed yet. Yeah, so I would say this is all latent. These things are arising from latency.
Okay,
So the potentiality is there and has not yet been expressed, but with the clash and the movement, it gets expressed, and latency becomes real or illusory or whatever the right term is.
That's right, because universal movement clashes with Akash, and this clash creates two states, one of energy and one of Akash. And notice right here, he's anticipating a big idea. From the energy state arises the subtle world. Remember that subtle here means the whole inner world of the six planes, up to and the Akash state precipitates the gross world. This is anticipating idea he's going to develop a lot. So you're getting the origination of the cosmos, Baba's cosmology, where you have God, the subtle world, and the gross world. And this is where it comes from. Again, there's nothing like this in God Speaks.
Ward, I just feel like these kinds of deep and intense discussions were not what we had intended to do with these sessions.
I think we're going too slowly. Yeah.
Well, I just feel like, certain people then have a lot of back and forth, and others are dropping
Get
off,
lost. Yeah.
Getting lost and so forth. So I just want to be careful with that. I know.
Okay. No, that's true. That's true. Why don't we go on to the next lecture then? No, that's a good point. We don't want to lose some of the people who aren't speaking up.
Yeah, I kind of feel like, we're recording this because people want to go more deeply. In the seminars themselves, we'll get to do that, and we're just going to have to be patient. Okay. All right.
So
So
this one is the next day, and here we're going to have 3 proofs. And in this table, you can see the triads that we were referring to.
So Sam, remember me? Yeah. So why don't you go ahead and start, and we're going to pause between the proofs so we can discuss them. Okay.
Yesterday, it was demonstrated that at the outset, energy and Akash are indeed within God, but latently so. I will prove this again, for if you grasp this point completely, you will understand further explanations easily. Today, I will explain this in 3 different ways. A, first proof, the ocean analogy. First, imagine that in the beginning, the Darya, the ocean, lies quiet without any movement. Now suppose that suddenly Darya begins to move. What comes out? What issues from this occurrence, this moving? 2 things. 1, the movement itself, and 2, the pokal, which is the empty space between waves. And again, from what source did this movement and pokal originate? From the Darya, the ocean itself. The movement and the Akash were latent, present inherently within the ocean in its original state. And hence they were able to manifest when the moving of the Darya began. Thus we have proved that movement and Akash are in the Darya from the beginning and always. Second proof, B. Under the aspect of knowledge, our second proof is algebraic as follows. God equals knowledge. Now, when this God is unconscious, it follows that knowledge must be ignorant. That is, knowledge knows not. And therefore, within knowledge, ignorance is. So when God is conscious, by extension, in that state from the very outset, knowledge knows that, quote, I know not, unquote. Why so? Because as we have seen, ignorance is inherent within knowledge, and ignorance means I know not. Now, this knowing that we are speaking of, this knowing that it does not know, where does it come from? From knowledge. So within this knowledge, both knowing and not knowing exist, but latently. Does not know means ignorance. Within knowledge, then, knowing as well as ignorance both abide.
So maybe you guys can all see the triad there, or whatever you want to call it. I was showing how that originates.
Okay. C, third proof, God and the cosmos. Now consider the following equivalences. God equals knowledge equals Darya, ocean. Energy equals knowing equals movement. Akash equals ignorance equals emptiness, pokal.
So there it is very starkly. And this table restates that a little bit more fully. Maybe we should go over this too.
Are you doing this, Ward? Yeah.
Maybe I should, because, okay, so we have those three proofs, right? The first proof on the right is the ocean analogy. The second proof is under the aspect of knowledge. And the third proof was under the aspect of God and the cosmos. So we have this basic triadic structure where the top is the real and the bottom two are these secondary opposites, which show the everything and the nothing in their shadow forms or in their reflected forms. I hope everyone is getting that concept. So, you know, the reflected forms means they're not real, but they show the likeness of the real and the not real within the domain of the not real. So in the top one, you have the real, which is God, which equals knowledge, which equals ocean. We're not getting light here. We had light brought up earlier, but at the moment, he's not bringing that in. So knowledge and the ocean are equivalent terms. And then you get the pran side of it. Energy is pran. So that's the very same idea. And now we've got the subtle domain, which is the domain of energy. And so you see, knowing is different than knowledge. Knowing is, you might say, the shadow version of the positive aspect of knowledge, whereas ignorance is the shadow version of the negative aspect of knowledge. You could say that knowledge in the real sense contains within it ignorance with a capital I, in the same way that the everything, capital E, contains within it the nothing with a capital N. But the false shadow versions of these are knowing and ignorance. And then in terms of the Darya ocean analogy, you have the movement within the ocean, which precipitates pokal or emptiness. So you see, he's brought all these ideas into alignment with each other. Let me see, what do we have? Is this the end of, okay, why don't we read on to the end of this lecture and then we could go back and dig
Okay.
some more. Mhm.
We proved above, A, the Darya contains both movement and emptiness, or hollowness. Then again, we proved in B that in knowledge, both knowing and ignorance inhere. By the same logic, we now conclude and take as proven that in God are energy and Akash.
Can you go a
Tomorrow,
little, can you go a little slower, Sam?
oh, sorry,
There's always somebody who wants to go slower. So
want me to start over?
yeah, please.
We proved above, A, that Darya contains both movement and emptiness or hollowness. Then again, we proved in B that in knowledge, both knowing and ignorance inhere. By the same logic, we may now conclude and take as proven that in God are energy and Akash. Tomorrow, we will go on to prove that from this same Akash, which is equivalent to ignorance and emptiness, the gross world is created. And that from energy, which equates with knowing and movement, arises the subtle world. From this, it can be inferred that only God is true. Why? Because when the thing from which the world is created is empty and hollow, what would the world be created out of? what would the world created out of it be? How could the world be otherwise? And
Mahu.
Mahu, yeah.
yeah,
Can you read that first? You see is that Persian? No? On the
Sorry.
screen?
Yes, it is
Yeah.
Persian. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was.
Can you read that? That's right.
Yeah, I didn't get it.
Can you read it for us?
Ye-
Oops. Again? Made her nervous, I think.
Okay, so
muted.
I'm sorry.
I had-
هر دو علم را بی دشمن ده که ما را دوست بس. I read again. هر دو علم را بی دشمن ده که ما را دوست بس.
In the
You can read
English
the
now?
meaning. Yeah, the
Give-
English.
give the two worlds to the enemy, for the friend is enough for me.
I'm sorry,
that a beaut-
I apologize, I correct myself. هر دو عالم را. عالم is words, not علم. I apologize. هر دو عالم را بی دشمن ده که ما را دوست بس.
I think it's a lovely line. So let's read the footnote because we're going to get the whole couplet here.
This is a transliteration of the second line from the first couplet of a ghazal by Awadi Maraga. One, the couplet reads, Dar Zamir, well, again, did you
And
want
Mahu, you want to
Mahu
give this
to
a
read
run?
that?
Yeah.
Mahu?
Yes, I might have hiccups. در ضمیری ما نمی گنجد بغایر از دوست کس. هر دو عالم را به دشمن ده که ما را دوست بس. Again. در ضمیر ما نمی گنجد بغیار از دوست کس. هر دو عالم را به دشمن ده که ما را دوست بس.
Okay, Sam, you want to keep?
Sure. This translates, no one fits in my mind but the friend. Give the two worlds to the enemy, for the friend is enough for me. The two worlds alluded to are the gross or physical world and the subtle or invisible world. Allah transcends both. Awadi himself was a Persian poet born in the city of Maraga in 1274-75, passing away there in 1338. His divan contains about 8,000 verses in various literary genres.
So you can see when he's talking about the two worlds, I'll go back to the previous page. That's down here on the bottom right. That would be the gross and the subtle, right? And he's been giving the explanation that what they correlate with, but Baba, he's concluding his lecture in his own way by saying, boys, forget about this creation, go to God. The gross and the subtle world, which I've just been explaining to you all about and giving you all these three proofs and drawing all these unbelievable correlations. Okay, forget about it. The only thing that's real is God. So you see how his couplet relates to what he's been talking about. I think it's a really nice couplet myself.
I love it. Yeah. Is that the end of that talk? Or?
That's the end. That's the end of it.
Yay, we did it. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Raise your
Yeah.
hands Christina, go first.
Hey, I had two comments. First was about these boys loving Meher Baba
Mm,
as a seeming consequence of the increase of learning. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that most of us here did not love our teachers when we were in high school. Let's just call it high school. We probably had at best tolerance and maybe, you know, a certain appreciation for that. But if you've ever had an experience of really appreciating so deeply and seeing the work that your teacher has gone through and the care and loving intention that a teacher has in imparting information, and you're open enough and you're accepting and you somehow capture the great value of what's being communicated, it is the most natural thing in the world to love your teacher. And when it's the top stuff, when, you know, it's like the most fundamental of fundamental stuff, and you understand or somehow get how it's at the root of all other understanding, it would make total sense that the love is just complete. So that is an angle that I offer.
That's nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Showing how this understanding and learning in this way naturally gives rise to love, which is what happened here, obviously.
Yeah, I think that happens. You know, it's what causes teachers to become mentors when a student, you know, embraces so much of what the teacher says, and it changes their life. It changes their view. It's a natural thing to love the one who is the giver. And then the second thing regarding waves, most everybody thinks of waves because they've seen a two-dimensional picture of a wave. I'm not talking about waves in the ocean. I'm talking about waves on an oscilloscope or something like that. And it is worth saying that the reason waves look the way they do on an oscilloscope or on something where you would be looking at the wave as it moves is because a wave is a three-dimensional thing. A wave is not a two-dimensional thing. And a wave is actually a spiral. Electricity moves in a spiral fashion. And it is because it has charge and it turns upon itself. But the only way that you can see the properties of a spiral is by flattening it into a wave and having the crest and trough change distance from each other and having the height of the crest and trough change from each other. And so it's just I think it's worth mentioning that this concept of the emptiness or space could be having to do with a spiral that causes an emptiness or a space that doesn't really even exist within itself. Just a comment. That's it.
Okay, Ellen.
Thank you. Ward, could you please talk a little bit about like the clash? You know, I keep coming back to that, trying to understand what the actual clash is. Is it just inherent in the contrariety between pran and Akash, or is there like a separate thing that is the clash?
Yeah. I don't fully understand it myself because I find it impossible to exactly conceive or imagine how emptiness and movement can clash. It doesn't seem like emptiness has substance that could clash with anything. So I'm still kind of, although to say I don't, I mean, I guess I can conceptually imagine that I can see this, that they are fundamentally opposite to each other.
Right.
Yeah, in the sense that, they would have to meet somehow for any kind of creation to arise out of them. And apparently their meeting is dynamic, and thus lightning, there's a flash of lightning that results. But I don't fully see it myself. I mean, I accept it and I like it a lot, but I don't altogether understand it myself either.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I
All
think it's one of the very deep themes of this section of the book, and we're going to have in the future a lot of delving into it by great thinkers who will show up.
And we're all looking forward to that. So I'm next. To continue on with what Ellen was saying, I saw a program recently, actually yesterday, a documentary called Everything and Nothing. And in that he explains, it's a scientist, he explains how the concept of the Big Bang developed. And I learned from that something that really astonished me, that made me think of the Clash. What he explained in that was that there came a point where there was an existence of the universe, but it was like a fog. To me, it's like the primordial gases. And then in an instant, all of the photons that existed in the universe flashed all together into clear light, so that they all became immediately transparent. So when we think of the Big Bang or a clash, we think of like an explosion, but it may be more energetic than physical. You know what I mean? So that's the one thing I was thinking about. And the other thing is, I forget what the second one was. Okay, Mahu, your turn.
We're going to get a lot more that will feed into these, meditations as we go along. I'll tell you, there's a lot more coming.
Oh, did you have something?
Yes, I just have a comment. I think it is important for all of us to review and do our best to understand the Baba's intent of delivering these lectures to a very young man. That way, I mean, I'm coming from my approach, because if the intention is clear, then we get most appreciation and understanding from really what Baba has gone through to deliver to us, and what Ward has done to really bring it all together. In the beginning, when we read the introduction, as soon as I saw the word philosophy, I asked my question from Ward. And Ward, I'm sorry, I was just being open. But really, except that one word in intro or preface, I don't remember. What really I see here is a balance, a pure balance of mind and heart. Even much better, I'm sorry, that what Don Stevens were bringing, for me at least. Why do I say that? Because during these lectures, I like to really say this. My heart is pumping. I have such a joy during these lectures, and I laugh, I smile all the time. Is that my mind? I don't think so. It's my heart. My heart is so happy by learning and knowing this knowledge. Why? Knowledge is equal to God. God is equal to ocean, Darya. That's it. So, and there's been a couple of comments in the chat about let's try to understand Baba and not mind and da. I'm sorry to say that I don't buy into that. Everything is Baba. Even my mind is Baba. Everything. Baba is nothing and everything. That's the essence of what Baba is delivering here. One more thing about this word. I thought about this a lot, that why Baba did this 1927 to 1929 and why to the such a young boys. And my little take is that the mind and heart of these boys were so purified, so innocent, that perhaps Baba used it as a filter for his universal work. Ali, Pak Ravan, and so forth. So there was a reason that he delivered it to those boys for our sake. Jai Baba.
Mm-hmm. Gil Alvarado had, I said this earlier, but that had reported that Chuggan, who was one of the Mandali at the time, said that when Baba explained his explanations to the boys, it was not at all the same experience as when he gave discourses to adults, because there were no barriers and would go in immediately. So when I read this, I try to imagine Baba dictating this. He probably would have a gesture for pokal, emptiness. He would hold his hands in a way where you would say, it's empty. It's a hollow space. Or movement. He would make a gesture where you would sort of see a universal movement within the ocean. So I think it would be, when he would explain this, it was really, really vivid. And one other thing about these three proofs is the second one. Notice that we've been getting knowledge now. We didn't in the last session we had, but he's bringing knowledge in. And knowledge is kind of a critical factor in this because it brings in consciousness and experience. The other terms don't. The ocean is sort of like an analogy. God, energy, and Akash, those don't, well, he does, okay, but energy does not necessarily imply any kind of conscious experience. So he wants everybody to know that the conscious experience of the jivatma, of the souls, are part of this whole story. They're one of the three terms he's using. And they're all kind of different aspects of the same fundamental principles he's enunciating. So Baba has been explaining, like you might say, the most fundamental principles that give rise to the creation out of God.
Okay, Marianne, sorry. Too many M's.
So the first page of the first talk from today, which would be what, the 8th. So that first, that first page, he's talking about, he's reiterating here that everything takes place in Darya, or the ocean.
Yeah.
Right. Well, from Friday's talk, there was a graph that showed pokal as being separate from the ocean. Am I correct, or do I remember that incorrectly?
I don't remember that. A diagram, was it?
Yeah, it was the one, that one.
Oh,
That
I
one.
see. Yeah.
The
Okay, no,
diagram-
it does represent it that way. That's true.
Yeah,
The
and I
diagram-
remember Ellen's comment about that, though, which was exactly what we read here.
The diagrams inherently, when you draw it, it's very hard to draw it within. So this is how Baba
Yeah.
drew it.
Okay, so he's just
but you have
one
to keep
step
in
at a
mind that-
time.
You have to
Yeah.
keep in mind that it is actually within, and that's what I said before.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
I
to
just
show
wanted to-
that the emptiness was within the ocean was not the purpose of this diagram. So he showed it otherwise. But now in this talk, he's really hammering it home This is all within Darya. Yeah, no, that's a good point though, because it shows how Baba is using different forms of thought to express the same ideas. Yeah.
Just wanted to clarify that. Thanks.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, I had never thought of that actually.
Is there
you
anyone
guys-
who hasn't had a question yet who wants to ask something?
I hope everybody's following this.
Yeah.
I mean, these are subjects for deep meditation, so that, you know.
Sandra, can Ellen repeat what she said about Pokal and Akash and within and without in her? She conceptualized about 15 minutes ago and she just referred to it, but it was very interesting, but I didn't follow it at first. And it would be nice if she could repeat it.
That they are two different terms, neither one of which begins to fully encompass the concept, because words can't encompass, the words are inherently inadequate. So pokal expresses a more of a hollowness which can be within, whereas Akash, as it has no limits, implies that it's not within the Darya. Pokal, because it says hollowness, implies that there is a Darya around it. So they are just two different words attempting to approach a description of something that is inherently beyond words. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know. That makes
No, it doesn't make sense, but okay.
no, it makes sense to me, and I think that's true. Baba is using words, like, to repeat what you're saying, basically. Baba is using words to try to explain the unexplainable.
It's like trying to sketch Baba's face. You draw all these little lines and they eventually they begin to kind of look like Baba's face. But Baba's face is beyond what you can, beyond that. But these are words that are sketching the Darya and all of these things that are beyond the conception of our minds. However, when Baba's done sketching it, we have some concept of it. Another
Do you want
similar.
to go on? Do you guys want to go on or start reading some more?
I have one last comment, Ward. It might be a little obtuse, but I think not. The idea of the foam that came up a couple lectures ago, couple times ago. This idea of collectiveness, that's how I see it. The collectiveness is always trying to have two forces. One, maintain its integrity, and the other have all of its components demonstrate or demonstrate their individuality. And so this pran and Akash clash seems to me something like that. I mean, it's somehow related to that, that there are forces, and that's just one example. There are forces that are happening at the same time, always. And the clash of them is, it doesn't seem like a clash. It just seems like a jostle, maybe.
And Marion? I'm sorry. Thank you, Christina. That was helpful. Marion?
Two questions, Ward. So Baba was not speaking, so he was using the alphabet board. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so somebody was reading what he was pointing to on the board. Okay, and
then it had to get translated also. Can you imagine the scene? Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's hard to imagine. And then is there any indication whether or not there was discussion with the boys as he was presenting each lecture each day?
There just aren't any descriptions of it, but I think it's most unlikely. I think probably Baba would just explain it and it would get translated into Marathi and Gujarati and Persian, and then Baba would go into the next thing. I think one of the things that the boys were waiting for was they all got to embrace Baba at the end, actually at the beginning and the end. And it was, I gather it was quite a scene. I remember Asfendiar talking about it, where they would just, you know, grab onto him and not want to let go. But, you know, when I thought about this, I thought, okay, Baba dictates in English, and then it has to get translated. I mean, we think about our modern students who, having to sit around to something in another language, probably pull out a knife and start killing each other and smashing windows and creating a riot. Well, back in those days, they might not have gone that far, but would their attention drift? And I don't think so, because I think that they would have just been watching Baba, and Baba would have been nodding and listening to the translation of what he had said into these other languages, you know, making these little gestures, and you know how he would be. And I think he was so fascinating to watch that they were just spellbound watching him. And Baba would be responding to the expression of what he had said in English in these other languages. And somehow that would keep it all current in everybody's minds. This is just my opinion, but I think they were just totally absorbed in Baba the whole time.
Well, you know, we do have time to read a little more, but I was also going to offer another suggestion, is maybe we could just skim through what we've read in these two talks and see if anything comes up, maybe just skim through it.
This has been, I mean, even though these have been short, there's
amazing.
really been a lot of stuff here. Yeah. So, right, yeah, this is last time. This is where pran, you can see Baba really started to get into it when he got into pran and Akash. So this is where he started today.
So can you zoom in on the page there? And
yeah, okay. So he mentions the three worlds, but he doesn't really say much about them. He's going to come back to this much later on. So now so if you remember all these terms, so like movement is universal energy. It's on the pran side of things. And as soon as the movement happens, yeah, I know this Buddhist idea, it keeps coming. Although the Buddhist idea refers to the cycle of experience. It's not metaphysical, but it is similar. It does bring it to mind. The term is pratitya samutpada, which the idea is that things arise concurrently and interdependently, and you can't have the one without the other. They use the example of three sticks leaning up against each other, and if you pull one away, they all fall down. Well, I think that these pran and Akash are co-conditions of each other. And the arising of one necessarily brings about the arising of the other. So it looks like that's what he's describing here. So remember, movement, energy, he also uses for that. He correlates it with the subtle sphere, right? Let me just jump ahead to show you a diagram where, I mean, we're going to see this stuff coming up. This is almost at the end. So this diagram is showing the flow of pran energy. You're all seeing this diagram, right? It's all visible.
Yep.
From the seventh plane, that's up here at the top left, down. These 7 stages are in reverse order. This is from the 7th plane down to the 7th stage is the first sky, or the first plane, where it meets the gross. So here you're seeing pran flowing down, and in the 4th stage, it breaks into 7 parts, 7 divisions. We had an indication of that. So you really don't get, it meets Akash, pran meets Akash down at the gross. The very bottom here is the gross sphere. And the 1st through the 6th are the subtle sphere. So he's hinted at, and he's going to say a lot more, that of a correlation between pran and the subtle sphere and Akash and the gross sphere. You see how he's linking up all these ideas in a really big way. So back to this. Yeah. And so a big emphasis has been that it's all within God. It's all within the ocean. I said this before, but I'll just say again. You know how in Islam and Christianity and Judaism, God and creation are separate from each other. Baba is not going to have that. They're all within God and God is within them. Anyone want to comment or any? So we have the.
Yeah, I have another comment, just a quick one.
Yeah.
Peter Booth wrote a wonderful, I'm going to call it essay, many years ago, and he's been working that thing for years, and with good effect. It's worthy of it, but he did it a while back, and that is of the turning upon itself of this will to know or desire to know, and the intention of that will to know, which always is happening, cannot see itself. And the effect of turning upon itself, to my mind, is akin to the beginning of a spiral, and is also akin to the idea of the creation of a space of nothingness. So like at a very, very seminal conceptual philosophical point level, it's all about that same movement. That same movement takes place iteration after iteration. It's like a fractal. The first movement creates 3 options for 3 other movements, and they create 5 other options, and they create 15 more. And it's a continuous a continuous attempt at knowing that will always and inevitably, because it's illusory, result in more not knowing. But it is that energy, that movement, that original will to know, which it's being discussed right here, keeps it going. I mean, Baba called it the must, the MUST, the must, So it's like a dance. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So I hope that people aren't thinking it's some form of multiplication table that needs to be memorized. I mean, I think that's what these talks are, is helping to understand the underlying concept behind, the movement and the emptiness that's created by the movement.
Yeah. So here you see the knowing and the ignorance co-arise, and that's movement and emptiness in this table at the bottom right.
Right.
Soon as you depart from the level of knowledge, which is the original state of God, you get these which keep mixing up with each other. I mean, these correlations are really significant. The subtle correlates with energy, correlates with knowing, correlates with movement. The gross correlates with Akash, correlates with ignorance, correlates with emptiness.
Or can you go back one more page there?
The previous page?
Yeah, the previous page.
This one here?
No, one before that, sorry.
This one?
Yeah, so I'm wondering if page 136, if people were okay that they got enough of that.
Yeah, we're getting these opposites. He's going to give us more on that.
Okay.
One of the topics that Baba never really devoted explanation to was attributes. He uses the word attributes, but he never devotes a discourse to explaining what they are. But when I read this, knowledge is the God term here, right? So it looks to me like these are almost like the same one reality seen under different attributes, Paramatma and ignorance, everything and nothing, light and shadow, Bharpur, fullness and emptiness. And we're going to get some more of that. Let me show you where, yeah, this one, we're going to get another bunch of opposites here. You know, in Baba's later writings and discourses like God Speaks, I mean, opposites are not explained out as much as they are here. They play a role, but Baba doesn't devote much attention to them, but here he does. So here you have knowledge, ignorance, Paramatma in the universe, the infinite and the most finite, Nirakar, which means the formless, and Sakar, which means the formful. In infinite intelligence, those terms come up a lot. Darya, and form or hollow space. By the way, this is an interesting thing. Baba correlates pokal and Akash with form, and he also correlates it with matter, which belongs to the domain of the gross. So that's something that really invites some thinking. So you see that this thing of the opposites is a big topic.
This is like the very basic stuff that you would need if you were to start doing a logical understanding of things as when they get really complicated and into the human form.
Yeah.
You'd need to understand the basic. To my mind, these right here that you are showing on the screen, you could make a correlation between knowledge, power, and bliss, you know, because
yeah, he hasn't brought up power and bliss, but those certainly would be part of the greater picture. I don't think he ever mentions knowledge, power, and bliss here, as a matter of fact.
no, that's because it's way far along. This is the basic stuff.
Yeah. But he wants knowledge in there. He wants as one of his fundamental ideational systems. Yeah. Yeah, look at the deep ideas that he's bringing up and interrelating. I mean, it's kind of amazing. You can see how he's bringing into the weave these fundamental themes. Yeah, so here we have the first real serious introduction of the opposites. Again, contrariety and God Speaks. You see, God Speaks doesn't really explain opposites, but it mentions contrariety, right? Which implies opposites. So here you get a real account of them.
Elizabeth, go ahead and unmute.
So Ward, before Christina made her comment, you were talking about, I think it was Akash relating to the gross, and it seems counterintuitive, counter-rational that something that is of the nothing is gross, which has form, because we in our world,
right?
I know it's a world of illusion in Baba's world, but we're living it, and so it doesn't feel illusory to us. It just seems like this is why it's hard, I think, to understand, especially when you first read about it. It just seems so crazy, like it's just the opposite of reality, and it's insane thinking. So how do you pull it together?
Yeah, no, that's a real point, because the gross sphere seems like it's the opposite of emptiness. It's what we experience as substantiality, whereas we would think of the inner worlds as kind of imaginary or empty. But that's apparently not so. You know, in contemporary physics, again, I've read a bunch of books on quantum and everything, but I can't pretend to really understand it. But the idea that the material world is comprised of these absolute solid particles, these little balls like atoms, you know, that is gone, man, that is gone. It's like probabilities that get actualized, the wave functions collapse, all this sort of thing.
Mhm.
So,
So I wanted to, oh, sorry.
yeah. So
Yeah.
anyway, in the light of contemporary science, the equation of the material world with emptiness is not so crazy as it might have seemed in the 1920s.
Mhm.
Yeah,
You know
sorry.
what? I've been thinking about this, and the word paradox kept coming up for me
Mm,
over the last few weeks, because they're just, it feels like the universe is created out of paradoxes.
mm,
So I went and looked up the word paradox, and I
Mm.
saw that this fascinates me. The origin is from the Greek para, which means distinct from,
mhm.
and doxa, which means opinion. So distinct from opinion.
Mm.
I like that definition.
Yeah, yeah.
It helps me focus on what my mind is trying to do as opposed to this. But basically, paradox is a statement or proposition that, despite sound or apparently sound reasoning from acceptable premises, leads to a conclusion that seems senseless, logically unacceptable, or self-contradictory.
Mm, mm.
Pretty much tells us where we are here.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to stop the recording if that's okay. Is there anything, Cheryl, did you need to have this on recording, or?
No, but I'd like to make a comment. You can.
Okay, so let me stop the recording, and before we do that, let's say the Beloved's Prayer. If you want to stop the share, Ward.
Yeah.
And we'll all unmute and say it together. Beloved God,
Beloved God,
help
Help
us
us
help
all
us all
To love you
more
more
and
and
more
more,
and more,
more and
more and
more,
more, and still yet
still yet more,
till we become
till we
worthy,
become worthy
of
union
union
with
you.
and
you.
help us
and
all
help us all
Us all
hold fast
hold
fast
Baba's
Baba's
Daman
Daman
till the
until
very
very
end.
the
end.
very end.
Avatar,
May
Baba.
May
Baba
Baba
Ki
Ki
Jai.
Jai.
All right.
Right.
Now I can't find the button to stop it. There it is.
Yeah.